Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I have to be honest, yesterday I was a little bit worried that I won't have anybody in this room because I was like, will they find room number 7 that is all the way in the back? That was kind of tricky. Good for you for finding that room. So let's begin. My name is May. I'm a software engineer. I'm a backend developer at Appsflyer. Before that, I was a founder of my own startup. And before that, I worked at a few different places. And oh yeah, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Did somebody miss those hills that where anybody wants to take pictures? You can do that, right? Beautiful, right? I know, I love them. I love them. R2D2, yeah? Please clap for the R2D2. Don't be like that. Come on. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now we can start. So we're here for me to tell you about my journey with Clojure. So like I said, before Appsflyer, I worked at a few different places. And every place I have ever worked at, I had to learn a new programming language. And it wasn't difficult. It was kind of easy. I mean, there was some languages that were a little bit different in terms of syntax. Some languages had, I don't know, different libraries, whatever. It wasn't that big of a deal. But then I got the job at Appsflyer, and then they said, okay, May, if you join Appsflyer, then you're going to have to learn Clojure. And I said, okay, another language, another syntax, right? Wrong. Because Clojure is a functional programming language. And it's not only different by syntax, it's that the whole mindset is different once you want to write anything in Clojure. So here is how I started my journey with Clojure. I started with this great book written by Daniel Higginbotham, which is awesome book for an introduction to Clojure. It's also funny, and I like to laugh when I read a coding book, which is kind of rare, right? And then what I did is I solved quite a few questions from this website, which is awesome. This website, the Clojure website, they have many different questions in different difficulty levels in Clojure. And so what you can do if you practice there, you will be familiar with the different functions that Clojure has to offer. You will also be able to learn a little bit about the syntax, and this is the first time that you will be overwhelmed with the amount of parentheses. But we'll get to that a little bit later. And after I did those things, I mean, both the book and the Clojure website, I still didn't feel that I can speak Clojure. I still didn't feel that I have that right mindset, because when I wanted to start developing something in Appsflyer, I still didn't feel that I have it. So, just like Yoda said, much to learn in Clojure you still have, my young Padawan. I'm sure he said that at some point. And so I knew that I had to change the way I'm trying to learn Clojure. So let's talk about Java. Or let's talk about how I learned Java over a weekend, and not Java over a weekend, but how I was able to find my way around in Java over one weekend, okay? It's not that by the end of a weekend I was able to write anything and everything in Java, but I was able to understand how to do things in Java. So I want to tell you first why I needed to do that over one weekend. So on a Friday morning, I got a call from a recruiter, and she offered me a job in a startup. And she said, listen, but we work in Java. Do you know Java? And I said, I can know Java by Sunday, because in Israel we work on Sundays. I'm from Israel. I don't know if I said it. Maybe I did. Anyway, so in Israel we work on Sundays. And I said, OK, let's schedule the interview to Sunday morning. I will do what I can. And so this is what I did over this weekend. I wrote a game that I called the calculus game. And let's see the game before I will explain why it was so good for me to learn Java with this game. So what you're about to see is a student running, trying to avoid exams, but he will never make it. That was a spoiler. I'm sorry. So So yeah, that's it. And that's it. Because he's a student and he fails. So I'll tell you what happened after that. It's when I was done writing this game, I was able to understand how to handle threads in Java. I was able to understand how to develop a game in an object-oriented language, to understand how to do parts of the game in Java. I was able to understand how to handle the file system in Java. And all of that was just over a weekend. Why was it possible? So it was possible because I knew what I want to develop. I wanted to develop an infinite runner. And since I'm very familiar with the way infinite runner looks, it was easy for me to concentrate on the language that I want to learn. I was able to ask my own questions. I was able to ask myself, how do I get the player to move from side to side? How do I get the player to jump when I press on the space bar? And then these questions led me from one to another, and I found answers to my own questions, which made my learning journey much, much better. And so, I know you want to know what happened. I got the job. Isn't it cool? So let's talk about Clojure. I mean, it worked once with Java. I was like, OK, I'm going back home from work over one weekend. I'm just going to learn Clojure over that one weekend. How? I'll just develop a game, and then that's it. Yeah, let's see the first game that I ever wrote in Clojure. There you go. That's it. It's not. There's no problem with the presentation. It's just that it was nothing. I was able to get nothing over a weekend, and also on the next weekend I got nothing. I mean, I got some sort of something that I thought was a game, but it wasn't. It didn't work, so it's not a game if it doesn't work, right? And so I knew that something is not right. What am I doing wrong? But then at the third weekend, I got this game. So what do you see here? This game is just what you see. Whatever button that you press, you have the right answer, which is a wonderful game. You always win. Very positive game. Let's see it in action. Crazy. Oh my God, isn't it crazy? Yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah, it's okay. It's not that crazy, because when my 10-year-old neighbor reached out to me and I was like, hey, do you want to see that new amazing game that I developed? And she looked at the screen and she was like, okay, that's not a game. And I said, yes, it is a game, little girl, but you don't understand it because it's for grown-ups. Grown-ups will enjoy my game. And then I knew that I lied. I lied to a 10-year-old girl, and it was my fault because I didn't want to admit that it's not even a game. It's a window with 2 buttons. And so let's talk about, why was it so hard? Why was it so hard for me, a developer with experience in different languages, to develop in Clojure? I'm going to give you only 2 examples because there were many things that made it harder, but I'm going to concentrate on this. Yeah, immutability changes everything. So if we ignore the joke here, it's literally that. Because what happens is we are used to thinking in one pattern of, OK, I have the object, I have the thing, I have the values, I want to change those values. How do I develop a game if I can't change the values? What does it even mean? And so that's the first thing that gets to your mind. What do I do if I don't have, like, how do I do a for loop if I can't change the counter? So many questions, right, that immutability brings to your life, and then you're overwhelmed. And then the next thing is, where did all the objects go? Like, how will I have a player object if there are no objects? And when you sit there in front of the computer and you want to develop a game and you know how to develop games, but you can't because you don't know how to do it in a different language, it feels like your hands are tied, and it's so annoying. Oh my God. So another something that Yoda said probably at some point in his life, if no mistake you have made, losing you are, a different game you should play. So a different language, different game, a different way of thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my journey to Clojure start. You get it? That it's like the Death Star? I hope you get it. I'm so glad you got it. Because you were laughing, I know you did. So, yeah. Welcome to my journey to Clojure start. Let's begin. So the first thing that you do when you want to get somewhere is you decide where, right? You just point that on the map. So the next thing that you want to do when you're going to Clojure Star is to find the fundamentals of a basic 2D game structure. And I am talking, when I say 2D game structures and 2D games in general, when I'm going to talk about it throughout the presentation, I only talk about the most simple 2D games. If it's Pac-Man, if it's Infinite Runner, if it's Snake, whatever it is that you love the most out of these wonderful games, choose one that you are very familiar with and that you like. And let's talk about the basic 2D game structure. So games are constructed of this. First of all, we have the framework functions, which is everything that has nothing to do with the logic of the game. What does it mean? The functions that has to do with loading images. The functions, if you have maybe, I don't know, network connections, this is where you'll do it. Handling the input from the keyboard, or if it's a swipe game, then the idea is that you are supposed to write these functions only once because they don't have any logic, and they don't have anything that has it has nothing to do with the logic of the game. And so you only want to write them once. And once you do it with Clojure, then it's supposed to be super easy, but it's not. But we're going to take a look at the code a little bit later, and then we'll talk about these functions. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the game-specific functions. Okay, this is where we handle the logic of the game. It means that with every game that you will write, you will have different functions in this part. So let's say that now you wanted, I don't know, the player, if you pressed the space, you wanted the player to move up, but then maybe in a different game, the player, if you press space, I don't know, the player starts shooting. I don't know what this game is, I just made it up, but maybe there is a game where you press space and you start shooting. The last part is pretty clear. It's just the assets part. And then that's it. Those are the three parts that you should be familiar with of a 2D game. OK, the next thing that I have to talk about, and it's funny because we won't see a loop in the Clojure code, but I want you to be familiar with the game loop anyway, because later on we will use this knowledge that I am giving you right now in order to understand other things in Clojure. So first of all, we start with initializing the game. If this is where you will be loading the images, this is where you will set all the initial values of the entities of the game. The next thing is the loop itself. And in this loop, we have three parts. We have handling the user input, getting it from the user. And then we need to update the game entities. It means that if now I have, I don't know, a Pac-Man that has to move from one side to another, it means that the location of the Pac-Man changed because of the input. So now I need to update the value of Pac-Man in the Pac-Man entity, right? Then I need to draw that to the screen. And that's the last part. So we have three parts. We have getting the input, then we have updating the game entities, then we have redrawing to the screen with the new values. So now that you're familiar with the 2D game structure, please hold on to that information because we are just about to use it. The next thing you should do, and please know this is the big difference for me, than developing other games. Other games, I just started to develop. I asked questions. I looked for examples, of how to do this and that. And I was just able to complete most of the things myself because it wasn't that different. But with Clojure, what stopped me was I didn't know how to write an idiomatic closure or in a functional way right at the beginning because I never saw that before. And so I realized that what I need to do is to find an already written 2D game in Clojure. There aren't many, okay, but the ones that are out there, and now you can also find my games in GitHub. I have the link at the presentation. Find a game and start working with a code that is already written. Why? Because you will start to learn what is the right way to handle data in Clojure. You will learn what is the right functional way to handle the functions. And so, like I said, find a game that is as simple as possible, because you don't want to concentrate on the game, right? If you are going to start by developing Skyrim, for example, that's going to be difficult. So don't start with a 3D crazy open world game. Start with a Backend, something that you just, it's easy to do. Take a game that you know and you love, because it will make you happy. That's it. No other reason. So this is the PlayCLJ. This is the library that I highly recommend for starting with developing a game in Clojure, because this library wraps up Java libraries that are meant for developing 2D games. And this will give you already a way to write an idiomatic Clojure with little effort. Just start coding. That's it. This is the way it feels when you start using PlayCLJ. It's written by Zach Oakes. This is absolutely wonderful to start with this library. So this is the first YouTube tutorial that I used, and this was the first game that I took. This is the code that I started with when I said to you guys, go find a code that is already written. This is the code that I took. So it was written by James Trunk. That's a great tutorial because he really goes step by step, and he goes into the little details of the code, and it's very, very easy to understand what he's talking about in this tutorial, which is important. It's not always like that in tutorials, right? So let's see the game that I developed with this. So it's a cow, and yeah, it's gonna collect the apples. And that's it. And it's a weird-looking cow. Her head is kind of weird, right? But yeah, but that's it. That's the simple game. Cow moving from side to side on the screen. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of code examples. So keep in mind that beautiful weird cow walking from side to side when we talk about code. So find a 2D game. Next thing you want to do is to map the game. And when I say map the game, I mean map the code of the game. You should open this code and start looking for the things that I talked about a bit before, like a few slides before, right? We talked about getting input from the user. We talked about loading images. We talked about having game entities, right? So if what will be our entities with the cow game? One of the entities will be the cow, first of all, the player, and other entities will be the apples scattered around the screen. So when you take the code, start looking for those things that you already know and sure that it has to be written in the code. And if you have even a little bit experience with coding, then you should be able to look for those things in code. Still, that's not completely different than everything. No, it is. It's completely different than everything. But you should still be able to do it. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of code. And these were very, very important for my understanding of Clojure. First thing, objects out, key value map in. And when I say that, I refer to the game entities. So what do we have here? We have a let function. And this is how you define entities. So the first entity that we define is apple, and the second one is cow. So far, so good, right? And how do we do it? We use a source. And what a source does is it takes, if you see the empty brackets over there, what a source does is it will return a map, key value maps, with the given values that we have over here. And so we have a map of apple, and then we also have a map of cow. How do I identify different entity? Because we have the key, the identifier key. Okay, so then later on, when we handle those entities inside functions, what we will do is just a simple if to check which entity this is that we're using at the moment. And then that's it. We return, let function returns right there at the end, it returns a vector of maps. So get this, we have a game. We don't create an object of a player. We don't create a whole different class for apples. All we have is this. And later on, when I develop more games from that code, I just used these and I added more values if I needed more things. If I wanted angles, if I wanted speed, anything that I wanted, it was just super easy to add. And every time that I want to change the location, I will not change the values. What will happen is I will just return a new map. That's it. It's different than what we're used to. Usually what we have in games is an object activating functions on itself. Over here, what you're about to see is functions calling more functions, which is recursion. So let's see that. Functions as values. OK. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the move and collect function. No, actually, it's going to be like just this. I don't have any more code examples, but I think that's enough. So yeah, move and collect. What we have over here is this. Moving cow, collecting apples. That's it. Remember, the game is super simple. We are able to see code that we've never seen before in a functional language, and we can start kind of understanding what's going on here because it's so simple. So this function gets entities, all the entities of the game. What are these entities? Just the ones that we just saw, right? The apples and the cow. What it does is, OK, I see the two arrows, and it says entities next to those arrows. And then, let's see. Now I see a map and remove collected object. And I see that they are right one under the other. So usually in Clojure, functions can get values from other functions. So probably what's going to happen here is whatever happens in this map function, the value that will be returned from this map will be inserted into the remove collected objects. We're not going to get into it right now, just in a few more slides, but I want you to hold on to this information. So let's dig deeper into the map function. So map function returns a map. What it does, it gets a function. You see how it's getting kind of annoying, the whole function thing? But you get used to it after quite some time. That's OK. Don't worry. You get used to it. So map gets a function. This function gets one entity. If we had plural, many entities before, and now we have one, it probably means that we iterate over the entities of the game right here. So it's not a for loop, but we're still iterating over entities. You see how that's so different than everything in life in general, because it's just different. So this function activates another function on the entity. So what happens to this entity? We start with update player position, which makes sense. If we got the entity of the player, the first thing that we want to do is to update the position of this player. Remember how we talked about the game loop? We start by updating the values of the entities. So if the player moved from one point to another, this is where we will update it. Another thing that we will do is we will check if there was something in the spot that the player moved to. I mean, if the cow moved to a spot that there was an apple there, the next thing that we will do is to update collected entities. And this is why we can now understand together that the result of update player position will be inserted to update collected. Because after we realized where is the new position of the cow, we now want to update with the result. Remember, we return a whole new map of the entities, and then it will be sent to the next function to update collected with the new values of the position, right? And so once we're done with all of that, what do we have to do? Remove the collected apples from the screen. That's it. So what you just saw, these arrows are called thread macros, and this is what enables taking value of a function and then that it will be sent to the other function in this order. And we have two different kinds of thread macros, the one with the 2 arrows and the one with the 1 arrow. The difference is one is thread macro first, which is the one with the 2 arrows, and then macro last, with the one with the 1 arrow. I'm not going to go into it because it doesn't matter. I just want you to understand the idea of what we just saw, and I want you to also be able to go look for those specific terms in Clojure. So I hope that wasn't too overwhelming, but now we get to the fun part. Add a feature, not a bug. Because if you added something and it works, good. That means that you truly understood the code that you're working on. But if you don't understand the code, you're just going to mess it up. So, make sure that you know what you're doing. That's a good thing to say anyway, just in general, not just for Clojure, right? So let's go back to the cow game. So what I had was a cow moving from 2 sides, right? That's it. And so what I added was I changed the images. Now it's some sort of Clojure astronaut-ish with, I don't know, spaceship, but they are tiny, and he's going to collect the spaceships that are smaller than him. But it made sense at the time. And another thing that I added was more directions. So let's see that crazy, crazy game of the astronaut weirdly collecting those things. And now he can move in 4 directions. You see right there, I added 2 more directions, which meant that I was able to go to those entity maps and edit them and edit the functions because I truly understood how data is handled in this game. And it is handled differently, but I understood it because I was able to add this simple thing of just only 2 more directions. So let's see the next thing that I did. OK, so for the next game, I'm going to have to ask you to clap. No, first clap, now I'm going to show you the game. That's like my victory dance because so yeah, it's a Pac-Man. Oh my God. It's a Pac-Man written all in Clojure. And it's based on the cow. It used to be a cow, right? But it's not a cow anymore. Now it's Pac-Man. And it went through a lot. Like this code went through so many changes. I cannot even almost remember what it looked like in the beginning. But I felt all the time in control. I knew what I was looking at. I was familiar with the very basics of the code, so I could take it to the next level. And what I added here, we'll see a video of this in just a second, but I really want to state what I added here because it's important. And it went in different stages. So I started by adding different entities to the game. Like I have another entity. I don't know if the ones in the back can see, but I have not only the yellow dots, I also have tiny cherries. And that was a thing in itself because it meant that I have another entity to handle, and I had to make sure that I handle it correctly. And then the other thing that I added was not going out of the screen, like boundaries of the screen, so the Pac-Man won't get lost. Like the cow, if you will start playing with the cow and you go way too far, that's it, you'll lose your player. So I added boundaries. The next thing that I added was, obviously, is the maze around that the Pac-Man can go there, which was annoying and difficult, but it made me happy when I succeeded, so it's a good thing, right? So let's see a little video of the Pac-Man in action right there. You see, that's the boundaries that he couldn't go beyond the screen, beautifully collecting every yellow dot, not going out of boundaries again. Yeah, traveling to get those so important. Oh yeah, he is a bit moonwalking sometimes. I couldn't get this straight, but who cares? Okay. A little, yeah, moonwalking again, right? So yeah, that's it. That's a Pac-Man game. All written in Clojure. Woo! So yeah, let's move forward. We added a feature, and I want to say something about adding features. Start small, take small steps, and make sure that you don't go overboard, even when you're trying to add features, right? Because the whole point is not to get it to be the best crazy game in the world. The whole point is to be able to understand Clojure. Okay, so take tiny steps. And okay, next thing, write a new game. And that's what I did. I wrote a new game in Clojure. And what it meant for me is that I wrote wrappers to those Java libraries myself. And it was great, because I was able to understand why Clojure is so great. It's because you get the functional language, but since it runs on the JVM, I was able to reach out to all those wonderful libraries already written in Java. And it was great. It wasn't that easy. I had to invest a lot of time in it. But it's important, because now at work I can wrap other libraries easily, because I understand how to do it. I truly understand how to do it, because I worked on a game to do it, and it was a simple game. Okay, last game for today, I promise. And everything, all of the games that I showed you, they are all in my GitHub, and they are completely valid as first games. Go have fun, go crazy with those astronaut cow Pac-Man games. And also my parenthesis snake. Get it? Because there are parentheses scattered around the screen, and the snake has to collect them in a balanced way. If you take a look at the corner over there, that's the pink parentheses collected balance, right? Isn't it awesome? I mean, it's okay. It's not that awesome, but yeah, let's see a video of my snake collecting the parentheses. Yeah. That's it. All right. So, we're done. Like, we're here. We're in Clojure Star right now, and we're having a good time. No, but to be serious, I learned a lot about Clojure in the past almost a year now that I work with Clojure, and it's been quite a journey for me, and it's interesting. I truly recommend going into Clojure if you're looking for something completely different, if you want something to completely change your mind, because once you find yourself trying to wrap your imperative mind around functional programming, you will be blown away. I promise. That's a challenge worth your time. Dream big. Start with tiny steps. Make sure that you don't go overboard. Make sure that you take a simple game. Because remember, what is your cause? If your cause is to learn a language, then focus on that and not on the game. That's it. Thank you.